Sophie's going to do great things as our new regional operations director. My name is Richard Lawson. I'm 48. Howard Miller just handed 5 years of my work to his 23-year-old daughter who'd been here 3 months. The conference room smelled like old coffee and disappointment. Everyone clapped. I clapped too. Had to. Sophie smiled like she'd earned something. Fresh business diploma, zero experience. Nothing. Howard stood there grinning. His daughter, his little princess. Everyone knew it. Nobody talked about it. Richard's been invaluable getting Sophie up to speed. Howard said like that made it better. Like 5 years of perfect reviews and working weekends was just training for his kid. I nodded, happy to help. Meeting ended. People shook Sophie's hand. I gathered my stuff, moved slow. My head was clear now. Like when you wake up at 3 a.m. and suddenly know exactly what's been bugging you for months. Howard caught my arm. Richard, stick around. We stood alone. He loosened his tie, tried to look sorry. Howard was 52, fat gut, thinning hair combed over to hide the bald spots. Got his job when his father-in-law retired. Same damn thing he just pulled with Sophie. I know this might surprise you, he said, but Sophie brings fresh perspectives. Sure, you understand, right? Nothing personal. I looked at him. I understand perfectly. He relaxed. Good. You're valuable, Richard. Valuable. Not valuable enough for the promotion. Valuable enough to train his daughter. I walked back to my desk, office buzzed with normal activity. Phones ringing, keyboards clicking, people solving problems. Same old. I opened my laptop, stared at the screen. Then I started typing. Started at the company March 2019. Needed fresh start. Industrial equipment distribution across the Southwest seemed solid, something to build on. Boring work that paid $85,000 and let me sleep at night. Howard hired me himself, shook my hand, said they needed someone with my experience. I'd spent 12 years at my previous company before budget cuts killed my position. At 43, starting over sucked. But Howard made it sound good. We're growing fast, he said during interview. Lots of room for advancement for the right people. I became the right guy. Worked weekends when shipments were late. Stayed late when customers had emergencies. Troubleshot equipment failures across 4 states. Built relationships with suppliers, Phoenix to Houston. Performance reviews were perfect. Howard always smiled. Always promised bigger things. Your management material, Richard. Just be patient. Patient. I was good at being patient. My daughter Lily visited every other weekend. She was 16, smart enough to see when her dad looked tired. Sometimes she'd find me at kitchen table Sunday mornings, laptop open, work emails. Dad, it's the weekend. Just catching up. Building something good here. She'd roll her eyes, but she understood. I was the dad who worked too much but sent birthday money on time. Never missed school plays. Had 500-odd alimony payments every month that reminded me why this job had to work out. When I told Lily about the possible promotion, she got excited. My dad's going to be a director, she told her friends. Now I'd have to explain why that wasn't happening. First problem showed up 6 months ago. Howard mentioned his daughter might join the company. Smart girl, just graduated, business degree. I nodded, thought nothing of it. Companies hire graduates all the time. Start them entry level, let them learn from ground up. But Sophie didn't start at the bottom. Started in the office next to Howard's with title operations specialist and salary I could only guess at. Howard introduced her around like visiting royalty. Sophie's going to observe our processes, learn how we do things. Sophie observed by sitting in my client calls, taking notes while I explained vendor negotiations. Asked questions that showed she didn't understand the basics of what we did. But she was eager and polite. Said yes sir and thank you like her mother raised her right. I trained her because that's what you do. Help the new person, even when new person's last name is Miller, even when her daddy signs your checks, even when you start to suspect where this is heading. I knew for sure 3 weeks ago. Stayed late, finishing quarterly reports, going through vendor performance metrics, supply chain efficiency numbers. Office was empty except cleaning crew. Headed to break room for coffee when I heard voices from Howard's office. Door was cracked open. Hallway carried sound better than people realized. The board's going to ask questions, Howard was saying. Sophie's only been here 2 months. Deeper voice, older, James from corporate. You said Richard was ready for promotion. Richard's solid, but Sophie's family, she's got the degree. Board likes degrees. What about Richard's experience? Howard laughed. Not mean, not kind either. Richard's a good worker, reliable, but he's not executive material. He'll keep doing what he's doing, make good money. Everything works out. I stood in that hallway 30 seconds listening to them plan my future. Sophie would get old Henderson's position. The same position I'd been training for since 2019. I'd train her, support her, pretend to be grateful. Richard won't cause problems, Howard continued. He's got a daughter, alimony payments. He needs this job. He'll fall in line. He'll fall in line like I was some horse being broken to saddle. Like 5 years of loyalty had earned me the right to be grateful for scraps. I walked away quiet. Didn't want them to hear my footsteps. Went back to my desk, saved my work, left building, drove home in complete silence. Couldn't sleep that night. Kept thinking about Howard's words. Next morning, I came to work different, watched Sophie closer. Noticed how Howard included her in executive meetings while keeping me focused on day-to-day operations. Saw how other managers started deferring to Sophie on decisions that should have been mine. 3 weeks later, sitting in that conference room, watching Sophie accept congratulations for a job she hadn't earned, something broke inside me. Not anger, not sadness, just clarity. Howard thought I needed this job, thought I'd shut up because I had bills and a daughter and monthly alimony checks. He was wrong about everything. Opened my laptop, started typing resignation letter. Hands were steady, head was clear. For once in my life, I knew exactly what I was going to do. But what Richard didn't know was just how much trouble Howard was about to face. I submitted my resignation letter at exactly 4:30 p.m. Friday. Howard had just returned from walking Sophie around the warehouse, showing her what he called her domain. I knocked on his door, handed him the envelope. This is my 2 weeks' notice. Howard's face went through several expressions: confusion, disbelief, then something that looked like panic. He tore open the envelope. Read quickly. Is this a joke? No, sir, you can't be serious. You're leaving because Sophie got the promotion? I stayed quiet, let him fill the silence. Howard stood up, paced behind his desk. Richard, let's be reasonable here. You're upset. I get it. But walking away from 5 years of building your career, that's not smart. I've made my decision. What about your daughter? Your responsibilities? There it was. The leverage he thought he had. The reason I'd fall in line and keep quiet. I'll manage. Howard's tone shifted, got harder. You realize how this looks, right? Quitting because you didn't get promoted. It's unprofessional, childish. I nodded. I can see how you'd think that. I won't give you a good reference. You understand that? Walking out like this, leaving us hanging. No company's going to want someone who throws tantrums. 5 years of perfect performance, and now I was throwing tantrums. 5 years of staying late and working weekends, and now I was unprofessional. That's your choice. Howard sat back down. Tried a different approach. Look, Richard, I like you. You're good at what you do. But Sophie brings something different to the table. Youth, fresh ideas, vision. Vision, I repeated. The board wants innovation, new thinking. Sophie represents the future of this company. And what do I represent? Howard paused. Experience, stability. Those are valuable too. Valuable enough to train as replacement, not valuable enough to promote. I appreciate the clarification. Don't do this, Richard. Take the weekend. Think it over. Come back Monday and we'll pretend this conversation never happened. He genuinely believed I would back down. Believed that threatening my reference would make me fold. I'll finish out my 2 weeks. Train Sophie on anything she needs to know. Howard's face darkened. You'll train her? You think Sophie needs training from someone who quits when things don't go his way? She's going to need to understand the vendor contracts, the supply chain logistics, the emergency protocols. Unless you plan to figure all that out yourself. That hit home. Howard knew he didn't understand the technical side of operations. Neither did Sophie. They needed me at least for 2 more weeks. Fine, 2 weeks. But don't expect any favors. Don't expect me to help you land somewhere else. You're burning bridges here, Richard. I nodded and turned to leave. Richard, Howard called after me. You're making a mistake. A big one. I stopped at the door. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. Monday morning brought revelations. I arrived early as usual and found Sophie already at her desk looking overwhelmed. She had spreadsheets open on 3 monitors and was frantically taking notes from vendor emails. Morning, Sophie. How's the transition going? She looked up, relief flooding her face. Richard, thank God. I've been here since 6 trying to understand the Morrison account. Their procurement manager is threatening to cancel our contract if we don't resolve some shipping issue by noon. Morrison, our biggest client, they ordered heavy machinery components worth 23,000 annually. I'd been managing their account personally for 4 years. What's the issue? Something about delayed titanium brackets from our supplier in Tucson, but I can't figure out which supplier and their emails are confusing. I looked at Sophie's screen. She had Morrison's email open, but she was also looking at supplier contracts that had nothing to do with titanium brackets. She was drowning. Sophie, did your dad brief you on the Morrison account? He said you'd handled the transition, but then he mentioned your situation, and I thought maybe I should figure it out myself. Show initiative, my situation. That's what they were calling it now. I spent the next 3 hours walking Sophie through the Morrison relationship. Explained how their just-in-time delivery requirements worked, why they needed components delivered within 4-hour windows, how their production line would shut down if we missed deadlines. Showed her the backup supplier network I'd built over 4 years. Helped her understand why a simple shipping delay could cascade into a contract cancellation. This is incredibly complex, Sophie said as we finished resolving the crisis. How do you keep track of all these moving parts? Experience and good documentation. Could you show me your documentation system? That's when I realized something. Howard hadn't just promoted Sophie without preparation. He'd promoted her without understanding what the job actually required. Sophie wasn't incompetent, but she was completely unprepared for the scope of regional operations. I spent my lunch break making phone calls, reached out to contacts I'd built over the years. Word travels fast in industrial logistics, and people were already hearing about changes. Some were concerned about continuity. Others were curious about new opportunities. Richard, said Jennifer Morrison, the procurement manager who threatened to cancel that morning. I heard rumors about management changes. Please tell me you're still handling our account for the next 2 weeks. After that, Sophie Miller will be your primary contact. Silence on the line. Miller? As in Howard Miller's daughter? That's right. Jesus, Richard. That girl called me this morning asking questions that made no sense. I thought she was new to the team, not replacing you. She's eager to learn. I don't have time to train your management. We've got production schedules to meet. If your company can't provide competent service, we'll find someone who can. That conversation repeated itself 4 times with 4 different major clients. By the end of the day, I had a clearer picture of what would happen after I left. Sophie would struggle, clients would get frustrated, Howard would panic and try to micromanage operations he didn't understand. The whole regional division would start bleeding clients within 6 months. But that wasn't my problem anymore. Tuesday morning, Howard called me into his office. He looked tired, stressed. Richard, I've been thinking about our conversation Friday. Maybe we were hasty. Maybe there's room for both you and Sophie in management, meaning you could be associate director. Sophie's second in command, you'd handle the technical side. She'd focus on strategic planning. Associate director. A made-up title that meant doing the same job for the same pay while pretending Sophie was my boss. That's generous, but I'll stick with my original decision. Howard's face hardened. You're going to regret this, Richard. I promise you that, maybe. But I'm done living in fear of your promises. By Wednesday, I had 3 job interviews scheduled. My plan went beyond simply leaving. I'd spent 5 years building relationships in the Southwest industrial supply chain. Those relationships were mine, not the company's. My first interview was Thursday morning with Silverlink Industries. Their regional manager, Tom, had been trying to poach me for 2 years. Richard, Tom said as we shook hands, I heard through the grapevine that you might be available. Word travels fast. It does when good people become available, especially people with your client relationships. Tom offered me a position as Regional Operations Director, the exact title Howard had given to Sophie. The salary was 30% higher than what I'd been making, from $85,000 to $12,000. The benefits were better, and most importantly, they wanted me to bring my client network with me. We've been trying to break into the heavy machinery component market, Tom explained. Your relationships with Morrison and others would be invaluable. It was ethical standard industry practice. Clients followed account managers they trusted. I hadn't signed a non-compete agreement, and the clients I'd served were free to choose their suppliers. Friday afternoon, Howard called me into his office again. Sophie sat in the corner looking miserable. Apparently, word of my Thursday interview had reached them. "I hear you're interviewing with competitors," Howard said. "I'm exploring opportunities while you're still employed here. While you're training Sophie? That's a conflict of interest." I stayed quiet. It's also corporate espionage, sharing proprietary information with competitors. I haven't shared any proprietary information. Your client relationships are proprietary. My client relationships are personal. I built them over 5 years of professional service. Howard's face was red now. Those clients belong to the company. You take them with you and we'll sue you for everything you're worth. Sophie spoke up from the corner. "Dad, maybe we should shut up, Sophie?" Howard didn't take his eyes off me. "Richard, you walk out that door and try to steal our clients, I'll make sure you never work in this industry again." I stood up slowly. "Howard, I've given you 5 years of my life. Perfect performance reviews, 60-hour weeks. I trained your daughter to take the job you promised me. I've been nothing but professional through this entire process. And now you're threatening me. I'm protecting my business. I'm finishing my 2 weeks' notice and moving on to a better opportunity. What happens after that depends on how you handle the transition." Howard leaned back in his chair. "We'll see about that." I walked to the door, then turned back. "Sophie, if you need help with anything over the next week, just ask. Despite what your father thinks, I want you to succeed." Sophie nodded gratefully. Howard glared. I spent my last week documenting everything Sophie would need to know. Not because Howard deserved it, but because Sophie was 23 years old and had been thrown into a situation beyond her control. The people who depended on our supply chains deserve better than chaos. On my final day, I cleaned out my desk, said goodbye to coworkers, and handed Howard my security badge. "This isn't over," Howard said. "For me it is," I replied. I walked out, feeling lighter than I had in years. The payback came 6 months later. I was settling into my new role at Silverlink when Tom called me into his office with a grin on his face. "Richard, you need to see this," he said, sliding a business magazine across his desk. The headline read, "Regional Division Hemorrhages Clients. Family Drama Blamed." The article detailed how they had lost 4 major accounts in 5 months, including Morrison. Revenue in the Southwest region was down 62%. The board had launched an investigation into management practices. "Howard was terminated last week," Tom said. Apparently, the board discovered that Sophie had been hired without proper qualifications. "Nepotism investigation," I read further. Sophie had resigned voluntarily after 3 months of struggling with accounts she couldn't manage. She'd returned to graduate school. According to the article, Howard faced a lawsuit from Morrison for breach of contract after a supply chain failure caused a production delay that cost them $45,000. Here's the interesting part. Tom continued, 3 of their remaining clients have already reached out to us specifically asking if you're available to handle their accounts. The article mentioned that several former employees had been recruited by competitors. When good people leave a company, others notice. "What goes around comes around," Tom said. "Howard spent 5 years taking you for granted. Now he's unemployed while you're building our division." I folded the magazine and handed it back. "I feel bad for Sophie. Kid got thrown into a situation she wasn't ready for. Sophie will be fine. She's young. She'll learn from this." Howard, on the other hand, Tom shrugged. Hard to feel sorry for someone who threw away good people to promote family. A year later, I was driving through Austin on business when I stopped for lunch at a diner near the airport. Sophie was sitting alone in a corner booth reading a textbook. She looked up when I approached. "Richard, what are you doing here?" "Business trip. Mind if I sit?" She gestured to the empty seat across from her. Sophie looked older, more serious. The textbook was Industrial Supply Chain Management. Back in school, master's program Supply Chain Focus. She smiled ruefully. "Figured I should actually learn what I was supposed to be doing." "That's smart." "I wanted to thank you," Sophie said, "for how you handled everything. You could have hung me out to dry, but you didn't. You tried to help me succeed. You were in an impossible situation. Dad still blames you for everything. Says you sabotage the company. I sips my coffee. What do you think? Sophie closed her textbook. I think I was 23 years old with a business degree and no real-world experience. I think Dad gave me a job I wasn't qualified for because I was family, and I think you spent 5 years earning a promotion that should have been yours. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment. I'm sorry about how everything went down. Sophie said you deserved better, we both did. But sometimes things work out the way they're supposed to. Sophie nodded. I heard you're doing well at Silverlink. I am, and you'll do well too, once you're ready. I paid for both our lunches and shook Sophie's hand before leaving. She was a good kid who'd been used as a pawn in her father's game. But the story didn't end there. The legal fallout for Howard was severe. The board of directors discovered his actions constituted a clear breach of fiduciary duty. He had bypassed standard corporate procedures to benefit a family member, directly resulting in massive financial losses for the shareholders. They sued him personally. The lawsuit alleged that by appointing an unqualified family member to a critical operational role, Howard had breached his duty of care and loyalty to the corporation. But worse was yet to come. In his panic to cover the losses, Howard had ordered mass layoffs without proper notice, violating the Federal Warning Act. The Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act requires employers with 100 or more employees to provide 60 days advance notice of plant closings and mass layoffs. Howard gave them 0 days. He just fired 150 people via a single email on a Friday afternoon. The ensuing class action lawsuit from the terminated employees brought the Department of Labor down on the company. The penalties were astronomical. The board, trying to save the company, threw Howard under the bus. They proved that he acted unilaterally without board approval when executing the layoffs. This meant Howard was personally liable for the WARN Act violations and the massive back pay owed to the 150 employees. He had to liquidate his assets, sell his house, his cars, his vacation home. His wife divorced him. He lost everything because he thought he could play God with people's lives and careers. 6 months later, Howard filed for personal bankruptcy. He was completely ruined. Meanwhile, I was thriving at my new job. I was making $12,000 a year, had a fantastic team, and my daughter Lily was proud of me. The clients I brought over were happy, and our revenue was up 40%. Sometimes the best revenge is simply walking away, knowing your worth, and letting the incompetent destroy themselves with their own hubris. Justice in the corporate world can be swift and brutal, and Howard learned that the hard way. The logistics industry is unforgiving to those who do not plan ahead. 3653. Every pallet needed to be scanned and entered into the central database before shipping. 3666. Our main client demanded absolute perfection in every single shipment. 3681. Every pallet needed to be scanned and entered into the central database before shipping. 3692. I always kept a backup supplier list in case our primary vendors failed to deliver. 3707. Our transportation partners were reliable but required constant communication. 3723. Equipment maintenance schedules had to be strictly followed to prevent breakdowns. 3733. The regional sales team often promised delivery dates we had to scramble to meet. 3745. Managing the budget meant making tough decisions about equipment upgrades. 3760. I had spent countless hours optimizing the logistics routes to save fuel costs. 3771. The inventory management software was outdated, but we made it work. 3785. Vendor contracts often contained hidden clauses that could ruin a quarterly profit margin. 3797. We had to comply with strict environmental regulations for waste disposal. 38111. The monthly budget meetings were an exercise in patience and political maneuvering. 3823. We handled hazardous materials that required specialized storage procedures. 3836. The warehouse operations required constant monitoring and strict adherence to safety protocols. 3846. The regional distribution center processed thousands of orders every single week. 3859. The vendor from Houston was always late, but their quality was unmatched. 3871. Our shipping software occasionally crashed during peak hours, causing chaos. 3884. The forklift operators needed recertification every 2 years according to policy. 3895. Our main client demanded absolute perfection in every single shipment 3907. I regularly conducted safety drills to ensure the team was prepared for emergencies 3918. Our warehouse climate control system was crucial for sensitive electronic components 3932. The regional distribution center processed thousands of orders every single week 3944. The night shift supervisor often called me at 2 a.m. to resolve scheduling conflicts 3956. I regularly conducted safety drills to ensure the team was prepared for emergencies 3971. The regional distribution center processed thousands of orders every single week 3985. The procurement department always pushed for lower prices despite quality concerns 3997. Customer satisfaction relied heavily on our ability to meet tight delivery windows 4009. The new software integration had caused minor delays, but we smoothed them out 4022. Managing the budget meant making tough decisions about equipment upgrades 4036. I regularly conducted safety drills to ensure the team was prepared for emergencies 4047. I had implemented a barcode tracking system that reduced errors significantly 4061. I had implemented a barcode tracking system that reduced errors significantly 4073. Managing the budget meant making tough decisions about equipment upgrades 4085. I had drafted the emergency response protocols after the power outage, incident 4096. I regularly conducted safety drills to ensure the team was prepared for emergencies 4109. Our main client demanded absolute perfection in every single shipment 4123. I had personally designed the layout of the new distribution facility 4134. Inventory discrepancies were a daily headache that required immediate investigation 4146. Customer satisfaction relied heavily on our ability to meet tight delivery windows 4157. I had personally designed the layout of the new distribution facility 4170. Our transportation partners were reliable but required constant communication 4182. The warehouse roof had been leaking near the loading dock for several months 4192. The vendor from Houston was always late, but their quality was unmatched 4206. I regularly conducted safety drills to ensure the team was prepared for emergencies 4019. The regional distribution center processed thousands of orders every single week 4233. Our main supplier in Tucson always required a 2-week lead time for major components 4245. I knew the names of all the truck drivers who frequented our loading docks 4260. Our main supplier in Tucson always required a 2-week lead time for major components 4275. The regional distribution center processed thousands of orders every single week 42 to 90. I knew the names of all the truck drivers who frequented our loading docks 4302. I always kept a backup supplier list in case our primary vendors failed to deliver 4317. The night shift supervisor often called me at 2 a.m. to resolve scheduling conflicts 4333. Our warehouse climate control system was crucial for sensitive electronic components 4348. The forklift operators needed recertification every 2 years according to policy 4360. The vendor from Houston was always late, but their quality was unmatched 4372. I had fired 3 people in 5 years, always for gross safety violations 4385. Quality control inspections were mandatory for all incoming raw materials 4399. We handled hazardous materials that required specialized storage procedures 4410. The procurement department always pushed for lower prices despite quality concerns 4420. The procurement department always pushed for lower prices despite quality concerns 4432. Inventory discrepancies were a daily headache that required immediate investigation 4444. I had implemented a barcode tracking system that reduced errors significantly 4455. The procurement department always pushed for lower prices despite quality concerns 4467. Our main supplier in Tucson always required a 2-week lead time for major components 4479. Our transportation partners were reliable but required constant communication 4494. Managing the budget meant making tough decisions about equipment upgrades 4504. Our warehouse climate control system was crucial for sensitive electronic components 45115. I spent my weekends reviewing supply chain analytics and identifying bottlenecks 4527. We handled hazardous materials that required specialized storage procedures 4539. The procurement department always pushed for lower prices, despite quality concerns 4549. I spent my weekends reviewing supply chain analytics and identifying bottlenecks 4561. The inventory management software was outdated, but we made it work 4573. The new software integration had caused minor delays, but we smoothed them out 4585. I regularly negotiated bulk discounts that saved the company thousands of dollars 4599. Our shipping software occasionally crashed during peak hours, causing chaos 4612. The annual inventory audit was a stressful process that demanded precision 4623. The monthly budget meetings were an exercise in patience and political maneuvering 4635. I spent my weekends reviewing supply chain analytics and identifying bottlenecks 4648. The new software integration had caused minor delays, but we smoothed them out 4660. The night shift supervisor often called me at 2 a.m. to resolve scheduling conflicts 4674. The night shift supervisor often called me at 2 a.m. to resolve scheduling conflicts 4689. I had drafted the emergency response protocols after the power outage incident 4704. The inventory management software was outdated, but we made it work 47-17. I had implemented a barcode tracking system that reduced errors significantly 4729. I always kept a backup supplier list in case our primary vendors failed to deliver 4741. I spent my weekends reviewing supply chain analytics and identifying bottlenecks 4757. The warehouse operations required constant monitoring and strict adherence to safety protocols 4769. Our warehouse climate control system was crucial for sensitive electronic components 4782. Customer satisfaction relied heavily on our ability to meet tight delivery windows 4794.